Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Hello and welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your home for all things relating to helping you on your journey to finding that amazing job. Each episode I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is a show I wish I had a decade ago when I graduated. And I'm back after a Christmas and New Year break, refreshed, recharged, and with some cracking interviews recorded and ready to go to make sure that this year is the one where you bag that dream graduate job. Thanks to all the mails and tweets over that period with recommendations for companies to chat to, and a special thanks to former guest Brian Sinclair for coming up with a cracking list of brilliant ideas for future shows. So stay tuned. Now, turning to the present, in this 69th episode of the Graduate Job Podcast, I continue in my quest to bring you the best and most exciting people to speak to about getting a graduate job. As once again, I've gone transatlantic and I'm this week speaking to Dr. Colby Jubenville over in the USA. In this episode, we delve into finding fulfillment at work, examining questions such as why you should look for gainful employment and not just employment, why you need to find your voice in what you do. We also cover why your 20s is the most important decade of your life and how conducting a personal assessment is so important to your long-term career success. Amongst other topics, we also touch on why you should be thinking about personal change and not personal development, and how natural curiosity can turbocharge your job search. No matter what type of graduate job you're looking for, and no matter where you are in your job search, you'll find nuggets of wisdom in my interview with Colby. Don't forget, as always, all links to everything we discuss, including a full transcript and book recommendations and web links, can be found over in the show notes, which this week are at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby, which is Colby. Before we start, a quick request from me. Your feedback helps me to create the episodes you want to hear, so I've set up a super simple and very quick survey as I want the show to best serve your needs. It's got just 5 questions and it'll take you just a minute to do, so please check it out at graduatejobpodcast.com/survey. Although just before we get to Colby, let's have a little message from today's sponsor, who are careergym.com. CareerGym is the #1 place for you to undertake all of your psychometric tests which you're going to face when you apply for a graduate job. Now, no matter which graduate job you apply for, unfortunately, you're going to have to do some sort of testing, whether it's verbal reasoning, situational judgment, and working style tests. You can practice these at careergym.com, as well as numerical and abstract reasoning tests. They're all produced by testing experts and exactly the same as the ones you'll see in the real graduate job tests. You can just practice them as you want, or you can do them in exam mode under time pressure, and they all come with detailed explanations and solutions, and you can track your progress and see how you compare against your peers. Now, it's never too early to start revising for psychometric tests and numerical tests, as you might not get much notice before you test, so you've got to make sure that you're ready to go. If you're applying for a graduate job, you're going to have to do them, so pull your finger out now and start revising straight away to make sure you don't fall at this very first hurdle. I've been recommending this site for years to the clients I coach, and it comes very highly recommended. And what's even better is if you use the code GJP, that's capital letters GJP, you'll get 20% off all of their tests. You can't say fairer than that. So head on over to careergym.com, that's careergym.com, and use the code GJP to get 20% off and start practicing today. Now on with the show. We've gone transatlantic in our quest to bring you the best job search talent, as this week we head all the way over to Tennessee in the US, and I'm very pleased to welcome author, international speaker, professor, entrepreneur, inventor and consultant, Dr. Colby Jubenville. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me be a small part of your audience with your audience today. And I look forward to sharing some of the things that have happened along the way for me and maybe valuable to the people that take the time to listen to you. So thank you.
No, thank you for joining us on the Graduate Job Podcast. And I gave you a very brief introduction there, but would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and describe what you do in your own words?
Yeah, sure. When I go out all over the country and I talk to people, I try to keep things pretty simple, but I was born to two educators that taught me the way you take on the world is to become an educator and marry an educator and educate other people. And that works all the way up till you want these things called lifestyle and freedom, because today we still don't certainly pay educators what they deserve. But, in your introduction there, you listed me as a college professor, and I'm proud to be a college professor. I'm proud of the work that I do. But there's a saying in the United States about college professor, and it goes something like this. It goes, those who can do, and then those who can't. And you probably know the old saying that they say they can't teach. And so that used to bother me until I really sat down and started to unpack that. And what the conclusion that I've come to is that if you can do and teach, you get paid for your value and not your time. And I think that we live in a new economy that it commands that we ask ourselves, do you want to get paid for your value, or do you want to get paid for your time? And so that's part of what I hopefully we can spend some time talking about today.
No, that'd be brilliant. And I know that saying well, those who can do and those who can't teach. And my parents were both teachers, so I'd remind them of that phrase every so often when I wanted to make a point with them. But
well, and then there's the old Woody Allen joke that goes along with it, and that those who can't teach PE. But that's that's probably a more of an American type joke. But my background is in college coaching and athletic coaching, and so part of my story is looking back on my life, and the people that had the greatest impact on me were coaches. And so if I look at those coaches, what they really did for me, they did three things. The number one, they made me have conversations I didn't want to have. Number two, they made me do things I didn't want to do. And number three, to ultimately become something I didn't think I could become. And as I sit here today with you on this podcast all the way across the ocean, I think it's a great example of the kind of investment that those coaches at St. Paul's High School in Mobile, Alabama, and Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, and then when I started a football program at Belhaven with Norman Joseph, and the investments that they made in me.
Brilliant. And we'll probably touch upon some of your lessons that you've learned as a football coach along the way as well. So maybe starting off, we'll touch upon your work as an author later on as well, but as director at the Centre of Student Coaching and Success, maybe if we start there, could you tell us a little bit more about the centre and what your role is as director?
Yeah, so the Center for Student Coaching and Success, the vision, it's something that I've had inside of me my entire life, and I think it's really a culmination of my unique perspective, education, and experience. But the center's vision is to help MTSU students become gainfully employed in their chosen career path prior to walking across the stage at graduation. And I think what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years in higher education is that gainful employment, the ability for graduates to secure gainful employment, is going to become the benchmark for colleges and universities. And so what I've seen that happens in the 20 years of doing what I do is that we tell 20-year-olds they have all the time in the world. And then when they get right to that point of that challenging gap of approaching graduation and gainful employment, when they get to that point, the gainful employment piece goes out the window because they're so worried about doing the necessary steps just to graduate.
Yep.
So they fall into that trap. They get that degree. They think that they've accomplished something, and while in fact they may have accomplished something, the reality is that that college degree is just the cost of doing business. It's the cost of getting into the show. It's the ticket to get into the game. Once you get into the game, it's your unique perspective, how you see what you do, your unique education, how you know what you do, and your unique experience, how you connect and deliver to what you do, that ultimately defines your ability to secure that gainful employment. And so what I figured out, so one of my clients who I have worked with for many, many years, John Floyd, Old South Properties, committed a 7-figure gift. Just because I started to drip on him the success stories that we had at MTSU and the student success that I created in a program that I ran there. And so he became fascinated with those stories. John is probably one of the most compassionate, caring, generous people you'll ever meet. And he committed that gift. And we built version 1 in February of 2017. We launched it. I built it prior to that. And I've built online education platforms before. And what I've realized is you got to go through version 1 to get to version 2. And so now we are at version 2. And to me, version 2 is so elegant and simple, and it works. And so here's the conclusion that I've come to. And here's the first big takeaway, I think, for your audience, is that people don't necessarily want personal development. They want personal change. And when I say that to people, they start nodding as if they understand what I'm saying, but they don't, because if you really believe that, the question then becomes, well, what are you ultimately trying to change? And so here's what I think we're trying to change. Colby has a narrative in his mind. It defines his relationships. It defines the choices he makes. It defines the opportunities he chooses. It defines whether he subscribes to fear of failure. And that script was either written by him or somebody else wrote it for him. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know truly what that script is, you can't walk people out of the change they want to create for themselves. And so if the end is personal change, then the question becomes, how do you change the narrative? Yep. And what I've figured out is the simplest and most powerful way to create personal change within people is through personal assessment and personal coaching. And we've partnered with Harrison Assessment, who is the #1 assessment company in the world that measures behavior rather than personality, because you can't change people's personality, but you can change their behavior. And we use narrative-based coaching templates along with that to drive the change, to change the narrative, to create a new story along with new activity that creates the gainful employment opportunities that these students truly seek.
No, I love that. And you covered a lot of detail there, Colby. So maybe then breaking it down so the listeners can begin to implement some of that or think about it themselves. How would you recommend that they would maybe go about trying to identify the scripts that they might have internally holding them back or, directing their behavior? How can they go about to think about what they might be?
Well, I think that the heavy lifting that we do is in the personal assessment. And so if you're looking for a place to start, it's the ability to have access to some kind of assessment that can provide you some insight into ultimately the things that drive you. So, for example, with Harrison Assessment, the very first report that we pull is a traits and definition report. And that traits and definition report, inside of it includes your life themes. And so my life themes, if you pull Colby's Harrison for traits and definition, my life themes are warmth, empathy, wants high pay, wants to lead, and influencing. And when I read those, I thought to myself, man, these people have nailed this. Warmth, empathy, wants high pay, wants to lead, and influencing. And then if you go down to prefer not to do, which is another section that's in this report, for Colby, it says tolerance of structure and diplomacy. And I said, man, this computer must be in my head, because that's exactly who I am as an individual, and certainly reflects my childhood, much less my career. And so I think that narrative starts with personal assessment.
Yeah, and you talked about the Harrison assessment. It's not one I've personally come across before. Is this one that listeners will be able to try themselves?
Well, there's a cost to it. But certainly if they would like to email me, or if they would like to go to the center website and reach out to me, then I certainly can put them in touch with. We partner with a company out of Atlanta, Peak Focus, and they are a certified Harrison provider, and certainly happy to get them connected with Julie Schur and the work that she does. I met Julie at a conference. I was a speaker there, and I sat in on one of her sessions, and she opened my eyes to just how powerful the assessment piece is.
Nice. Knowing yourself is the first stage for making any improvements. So it's no, definitely, if there's an investment involved, it's one that's worth making, because it will last you a lifetime. So listeners, there'll be links to everything we discussed today and a full transcript, so you'll be able to see the links that Dr. Colby's mentioned in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby.
Well, and hey, let me say this too, so that you can connect the dots here. I believe there's only one reason people decide to attend higher education and complete a higher education degree, any type of formal education, to be honest with you. They may not know it, they may not be able to articulate it, but I think it's really why they're there, and it's for gainful employment. And so to start with, I think we have to educate people about what is the difference between employment and gainful employment.
Now, that was going to be my next question, so you've read my mind.
Well, good. Well, I do that often. I'm really good at mind reading. just ask my wife. It's so employment's trading time for money, and gainful employment is where you get some kind of psychological benefit, meaning, purpose, and contribution from the work that you do. And so if we know that gainful employment is why people come to a college campus, then we have to back that up and say, how do you uncover meaning and purpose and contribution? And the way I think you do that is through some sort of assessment that really taps into those pieces that are important to you.
No, definitely. And do you finding people's gainful employment, so one person's employment will be another person's gainful employment, do you find with your students it's easy for them to tap into what their particular gainful employment will be?
Do I find that it's easy?
Yep.
No, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we have. Here's what happens. At 8 years old, we look at anybody and you say, you can be anything you want to be. At 18 years old, we say, hey, we don't care what you do, just get out of the house. and the system's not built the system isn't built for people to tap into what I call voice, which is the intersection of talent and passion and conscience and need in the world. And so if you look at talent, passion, conscience, and need in the world, where is there an opportunity for you to really engage those pieces and find those things? And to me, it's in struggle. To me, it's in pushing yourself past your comfort zones. Well, how is the world set up today? The world is set up to be noisy, distracted, blurry. And we're going to remove every obstacle that we can through technology and prosperity and quality of life. And so what's the consequence to that? The consequence is that we bring out an entire generation of people who have had very little meaningful experiences that cannot articulate their value, much less turn within themselves and say, this is what meaning and purpose and contribution is for me. It reminds me of this time in my life. I was probably in 10th grade. I was at St. Paul's and I was coaching an intramural basketball team. And this is the moment that I found my voice. But I was coaching the intramural basketball team. And when we play intramural basketball, it was a co-ed league and you had to play man-to-man defense. And the way you teach man-to-man defense to little kids, these were fifth graders, my little brother happened to be on the team, is you say, hey, you go wherever they go. And kids take you literally when you say those kinds of things. Well, these quarters lasted about 4 minutes long, maybe 5 minutes. And so if you scored one basket, you could win the game. And so I sat there, and we had 30 minutes a week to practice. I sat there and thought to myself, what could I do to guarantee, to ensure that I could at least get one basket? And I thought to myself, if Zach, my little brother, is the only kid on the team that could dribble the basketball, then I need to get everybody else off the floor. And so I said to the team, I said, we're going to go all line up underneath the goal. And when Zach brings the ball up the court and holds up the number 1, you're going to run up into the stands and give your parents a hug. If we do this right, the other kids will follow you. So he sets it up, comes down, holds up the number 1. They go running up to the stands. The other team follows. The crowd starts laughing. Zach steps to the left, jab steps to the left, goes to the right, lays it up with his left hand and scores. The right hand and scores the basket. And so both sides are going crazy. And my coach, my freshman coach, Sandy Santoli, who was the commissioner of the league, he comes out and he grabs the microphone and he says, that's an illegal play. You know, I'm waving the basket. But the takeaway for your audience was he came down and he leaned over me. He said, Colby, you're going to be a great coach one day, just not today. I'm waving the basket. And see, what he did for me that we don't do for people that is so powerful is he affirmed and validated the worth and potential in me in such a clear way that for the first time I could see it for myself. And when somebody does that for somebody else in that moment, here's what I said to myself. I walked out of that gym. I walked up the sidewalk. I walked back to my car and I said to myself, I'm going to coach and teach on an ever increasing stage. And see, in that moment, for the first time in my life, I had clarity and focus and direction on every decision that I was going to make moving forward. And once that happens for you, you will not let anyone stop you. And what I will submit to you today is those opportunities for that to happen because of the culture that we live in, because of what society commands that we do, because of the law and the legal environment that we live in, that those opportunities become less and less and less.
Powerful stuff. I love that, Colby. And I like the way that you break down the different aspects of, finding your voice. So talent, passion, conscience and need. And
yeah,
I'm sure there's things that the listeners probably haven't consciously thought about. And if they have, it's maybe been fleeting and, not putting the time and attention into thinking about what they are and how they might shape the type of jobs that they apply to and go for. So stepping back then and thinking on a practical level, are there any exercises that you'd recommend to help people to come to the realization about finding their voice?
Well, sure. I think the very first thing you have to do is number one, get around people who are better than you. It's number one. That's when things really started to change for me. I got around people who were better than me, and then I started asking them questions about how they did things related to that moment. Here's number two. Here's what the research says, is that in our 20s, the most defining decade of our life is our 20s. But yet we tell people in their 20s, here's what we say: you got all the time in the world. You got all the time in the world, when in reality what sociologists, psychologists, neurologists, what everyone says is that your 20s are the defining decade. And so if it were me and you're looking for those exercises, I think it first starts with being able to recognize when you're in those moments and being able to lean into that adversity and that struggle and not ask, why is this happening to me, but what is this trying to teach me? And from there, if you understand that voice is the intersection of those things, of talent and passion and conscience and need in the world. And talent's God-given, not man-given. Everybody was on board with talent, some kind of talent. Passion, I think is a word that we have overused. And I think it's shifting from passion to what are you naturally curious about. I've always been naturally curious about, why does one person get to this level and another person get to this level? What's the difference? What happens? In conscience to me is what do you have internally in you about meaning and purpose and contribution? It's never been about the money for me. It's always been about the relationship. What's in it, the relationship? What's going to happen in the relationship? I love the relationship. And then, need in the world, it's based on your unique perspective, education, and experience. And so if you're looking for an exercise, it's to write those. I use whiteboards. I love whiteboards. I'm a visual guy. I've got to see it. And so you put those things up on the board, and then you say, talent. What am I naturally talented at? And if you don't know the answer to that, you go to somebody else that's close to you and say, hey, based on what you know about what you're talented at, and you go through each one of those steps, and that starts to give you an outline to intersect talent and passion and conscience and need in the world.
And do you think you need all four to find your voice, or can you, can you do it with just maybe two of the legs or three of the legs?
Well, I mean, I think so. Okay, that's a really good question. Here's my answer to that. There's a guy named Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan started Strategic Coach. Dan Sullivan uses a term called unique ability. Unique ability is where you get into this space that gives you energy and gives other people energy, that creates new levels of challenges and new levels of results. I will tell you, at one time in my life, I was the world's worst speaker. That this woman said to me, hey, will you come and speak to us? And I'm like, man, I can speak in my sleep. This will be easy. And I got up there and I absolutely said to myself, can I pull the fire alarm? Can I crawl underneath the table? Can I tell them I can't come because I'm sick? Here's your speaker, Colby Jubenville. And in that moment, it created new levels of challenges and new levels of our opportunities. So that's what unique ability is. And so when you get into that unique ability space, you feel those things. So I don't know the answer to that, but here's what I do know, is that there's different levels of work that Sullivan talks about that leads up to unique ability. And those are incompetence, and we all know what that is, and then competence, and we know what that is, and then excellence. And he calls it the excellence trap. And the excellence trap is where you do work. Other people go, man, that person is really good at that work. You make enough money to take care of your economic needs, but yet he doesn't give you energy and it doesn't give other people energy. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have to decide, I have always been driven by, will this give me new levels of opportunity and new levels of challenges? And then you have to look at what fuels that, and that's that talent and passion and conscience and need in the world.
No, I like that. And you talked about, getting around people who are better than you. Yeah. I was fascinated by a story I read. I think it was from one of your articles in the Washington Times, talking about how you persuaded Joe Calloway to be your mentor. Can you maybe share this with the listeners? It's a lovely story.
Calloway's the best, man. I mean, he agreed to meet me, and I said, man, I'm not crazy. I'm not a serial killer. I'm just a professor that wants to be you. And he was gracious enough to meet me. And I think we met up at Nashville, and in 4 hours, I think I learned more about what I wanted out of life and how I could go about getting it. And Calloway has written some of the best books in the business. And his books are so fundamental to my success. My favorite is Be the Best at What Matters Most, the only strategy you'll ever need. And so I called Calloway and I said, Joe, man, your books are so good that the titles are so good that you don't need to even read the book. And he started laughing, and only in Joe's voice, he goes, I know, Colby, isn't that cool? I was like, yeah, that's really cool. But if you turn to chapter 2 of Be the Best at What Matters Most, chapter 2 is it's not that complicated, and the chapter's 2 pages. So Calloway's got it figured out. I'll never be able to get to that level, but I sure wake up and getting around people that are better than you certainly will push you every day that you choose to.
What are some of the strategies you recommend for putting yourselves in that position? Does it matter if it's paid, in terms of paid mentors or coaches, or is it just more about networking and getting out there and pressing the flesh?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. People aren't going to like my answer, because either way it's difficult. I think that we live in a world today where information is a commodity. Knowledge isn't, but information is. And so if we went to Google today, and you and I We're hanging out at your house, and we said, hey, I'm fascinated with how to build high-performing teams. And we type into Google how to build high-performing teams. We're going to get thousands upon thousands of hits. And in those hits, you and I are going to have to decide which article we want to go to first. It could be a podcast, article, video, blog. Now stay with me here because this is really important. I built a model called the self-directed, self-selected coaching model, and the self-directed piece looks like this. Innovation means you go first. You go first to gainful employment. Innovation means you go first. You go first to gainful employment. You innovate through new concepts and theories. Concepts are big picture ideas. Theories are big picture ideas that have been tested to be proven true or not true. Those lead to frameworks. Frameworks provide structure, predictability, and efficiency. When I walk in to consult, when I walk in to coach, when I walk in to solve a problem, I've got frameworks that I'm ready to pull out at any point to give people structure, predictability, and efficiency. Once I have that, then I can go to work. Now, how do you get that? Well, you get that by going to Google and you find an article, podcast, video, or blog related to this concept or theory. So you and I now are back in Google and we're going through the high performance team, and you find this one article, and in that article, here's what it said. 78% of CEOs do not know when asked what the highest value of their time is. And so you go back to the whiteboard and you put number one, answer this. What is the highest value of your time? When you go to work, where's the place that you can create the greatest impact? See, that just led you to one idea that now, based on that, is going to lead you to the next idea and point of discovery, to the next idea and that point of discovery. That's a simple, easy, powerful, impactful way to coach yourself. I do that every day. I become naturally curious about something. I go to Google and I study it. It takes me to a podcast. It takes me to a video. That takes me to a blog. That takes me to Twitter. I get on Twitter. I reach out to the person. I say, hey, I read this stuff that you wrote. Can I connect with you? I have a phone call. And now I have new knowledge. The other way you can do this is to hire a coach that holds you accountable, that has packaged up material, that can serve it up to you in a way that you can get it, and that can demand and teach you towards the outcomes you want to create for yourself. So there you go. There's the two ways I think you can do it.
No, I love it. I really enjoyed reading about the SDSS model that you talked about, the self-directed, self-selected coaching model. I thought it was brilliant, just nice and clear and simple, but just really insightful. So,
you know what I think, and I'm not saying this I promise you, if we can figure out how to get this model into the hands of more people, we can drive so much more success. That model is the perfect model for the generation that's coming after us. When I start off and say, tell me if you think any of this is not 100% the truth, and I start with reality, and I say every day you wake up as a leader and manager and you get paid to do two things at the most basic level: solve problems and make decisions. That's what you get paid to do. Here, I'll give you an example. Just last week, what did we see? In the NCAA college athletics, what do we see? The FBI rolls up and says Auburn, Louisville, and the list goes on and on. You'll be summoned up here to answer these questions. So now the president has to make a decision about how he's going to solve this problem. How he solves that problem, or she solves that problem and makes that decision, will define the results that are created for that organization. And those results will define whether that president moves up, down, or stays right where he is or she is in their career. And that is simply how the world works. The reason that I can have this conversation with you today, the reason that I can secure a 7-figure gift and solve and have a center for student coaching and success on a college campus, the reason I can do all those things is because I know how to drive results. And I'm not afraid to tell people I will do that and what it will take to do it. That's where you got to start with people. They have to understand. People want to fight me on this. They go, oh, well, Colby, no, they don't just solve problems or make decisions. And I said, I didn't say they just do that. I said, here's what I said. That's what they get paid to do. That's what they get paid to do. Nick Saban, the greatest coach in the history of mankind in the sport of football in America, gets paid what he gets paid because he uses culture as a competitive advantage. He understood that you can only develop people as far as they trust you. And he built systems to create that. He started that 20 years ago and has built that system 30 years ago, built it to where it is today. And so people, they look at him and go, oh, well, he just recruits talent. No, that's not true. He does recruit talent, but that's a byproduct of the systems that he built because he looked at the sport of football and said, there's a better way to solve problems and make decisions. And so, if you believe that you're really here in leadership and management to solve problems and make decisions, then the question that I always ask these kids is, has anybody ever in your college career taught you how to systematically, using frameworks, solve problems and make decisions? And the answer every time is no one has. Well, today's the day. I'm going to teach you. And I spend the first 4 weeks of every class, I hammer this thing till no one can hide from it. And they stand up and go up there and draw the model up. Then once you do that, we list all the problems within the industry. Then once you do that, you teach people how to develop effective problem statements. And so I appreciate you saying that. I think it's something that's so valuable. And I need to do a better job of continuing to get out on the road and tell that story.
Well, you're doing it today. And listeners, you can check out the model for yourself. If you go to the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby, you'll find links to the model there so you can see it and understand it for yourself. Colby, unfortunately, time is running over as it's absolutely flown today. One final question before we maybe move on to our weekly staple questions. We've talked a lot about sport today, and there's been lots of sport references and sport analogies. You mentioned your time as a coach of basketball and football as well. What do you think has been the biggest lesson that you've learnt through coaching over the years?
I think the single greatest lesson, there's two. My coach at Millsaps College in Jackson, Mississippi, Tommy Raniger, he taught me this simple idea of how to use adversity to accelerate growth. It's a mindset. It's about self-reliance. And I used to think that was the only thing that mattered. I don't anymore. I used to think that was the case. Then I went and worked with a guy named Norman Joseph. And Norman taught me this simple idea that the goal is not to create independent adults. The goal is to create adults that can depend on each other. And that's straight out of Brene Brown stuff. And so I think those two ideas married together, if you can start with the self-reliance, if you can start to depend on yourself, and then you can learn that you can depend on other people and other people can depend on you, those two things together, there's nothing that can't be accomplished.
I love that. That's a brilliant point for us to finish the main part of the interview on. That's using adversity to accelerate growth. I like that term. That's a really good one, and a way to think about if you're going through a difficult time. Just bear that in mind and keep it at the front of your mind. So Colby, shifting gears and putting you on the spot now. So first question, we've mentioned some authors already today. Which one book would you recommend that our listeners should read?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to Callaway, but I'll cite his first book, and his first book is Category of One, How to Transcend Commodity and Defy Comparison. And that book, his writing style, the message that's found within that is such a powerful and simple message that I think everybody needs to read. Of course, I could be a little self-serving and say, hey, my book, my latest book, Me, How to Sell Who You Are, What You Do, and Why You Matter to the World would be a good one as well. So
yeah, I'd recommend that one, and it's going to be prominently linked to in the show notes. But Joe, I've not come across Joe Callaway before, so I'll look forward to getting stuck into some of his works. And you think that's a good one to start with, Category of One?
I do, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent.
When I first got going, that was a book that I was able to pick up and use instantly.
That's always good. We like nice, practical, and useful books.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for that one. And next question: which internet resource, so it could be a website, could be an app, would you recommend that our listeners should check out?
This is going to sound kind of funny, but I'll go with the Go Payment app. I love going to places and selling books and scanning people's credit card and letting that show up in my bank account.
That's a good one for all you entrepreneurs out there. Definitely check out Go Payment. That sounds like a good one.
That's pretty tacky, but that's hey, it's Friday, right? I mean, I can say that.
Yeah, you can. I've put you on the spot, so that's we'll give you that one. And the final question, Colby: what one tip would you give listeners that they can implement today to help them on their job search?
They're gonna come in and they're gonna ask you behavioral based interview questions, like, tell me about a time in your life when you had some adversity. What was that adversity? How did you handle that adversity? And how did you get to the other side of that adversity? And if you can't answer those questions, you will not get hired. So I would go to Google and type in behavioral based interview questions and start to try to review that process, because that's the predominant technique used in hiring today.
Excellent advice there, and we've had a few episodes just on that topic, so I will also link to them in the show notes, so you can check them out at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby. Colby, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You've left some brilliant insights today. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you and the work that you do?
Well, it's my Twitter is at Dr. Jubenville. I've got a Washington Times blog. If you'll just search Colby Jubenville, Washington Times, and then my website is drdrjubenville, JUBENVILLE.com. You can find me there.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us on the Graduate Job Podcast.
Thank you, my friend.
Many thanks again to the wonderful Colby Jubenville. Lots to take in from the episode, so have a listen again and check out the transcript over at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby. So there you go this week. That is everything from me. One more thing before we finish though. If you would like to support the show, one way is to buy your goods through Amazon via one of the links from the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/Colby. Now, it doesn't cost you anything, but it helps to keep the lights on here with hosting and the like. So if you could do that, it would be much appreciated. All you got to do is just click on one of the links. It'll take you to Amazon, and then you just buy all the stuff you were going to buy as normal. If you have any questions or need some coaching on any aspect of getting a graduate job, then I am here to help. Do drop me a line at hello@graduatejobpodcast.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Do join me in 2 weeks' time when I speak to Corinne Grant and Tristan Hooley as we discuss their new book, You're Hired, the Graduate Career Handbook. It's a goodie. All that remains to say is I hope you enjoyed the episode today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.